In this screencast, we'll be covering economic anthropology. Economic anthropology deals with various aspects of economics and relates this to the broader social and cultural settings within which these economic relations take place. For example, while I was attending conferences in the 2010s in Seattle, I would frequently walk past a couple of Starbucks franchises, all serving the same type of coffee on the way down to Pike's Market, where I saw another Starbucks that had a line out the door. The wait for the coffee that was the same just 2 blocks up the road was about 45 minutes. Why were people going here? Well, the idea that this was the first Starbucks or the best Starbucks. And so people wanted not only to drink the coffee, but have the Starbucks experience there. So this became a destination in and of itself. So same coffee, same cost, franchise across the way, but somehow this is the one that people are willing to wait for much longer periods of time in line for. One of the things that became apparent during the COVID-19 pandemic have been issues of supply chain, and anthropologists have for long periods of time been looking at supply chain issues and particularly how products are produced and what the ramifications of that production is. In her book, Spirits of Resistance in Capitalist Discipline, Awia Ong looks at the case of semiconductor factory workers in Malaysia, noting the rather extreme circumstances within which they work in producing semiconductors. This often involves exposure to harsh chemicals, long periods of sitting, as well as eye strain and repetitive use injuries. The book talks particularly about this idea of possession and witchcraft possession or spirit possession, in which individuals and workers are seen by the corporation that they're working for as less productive. So this becomes a concern, and mediums are brought in order to help to deal with this disturbance to production overall. And Awia Ong documents all of this in her book. So as a quick overview here, we're going to introduce economic anthropology and talk a little bit about its relation to economics. We'll then go into a discussion of production, distribution, exchange, and consumption from an anthropological perspective. Economic anthropology is the part of the discipline of anthropology that debates issues of human nature that relate directly to the decisions of daily life and making a living. Economics has to do with making a living, acquiring products that are satisfying and at the smallest cost. This is known as utility and maximizing utility. A key tenet of economics is this idea of scarcity, which is essentially that people will never have enough resources to fulfill all of their desires. In other words, there's this insatiable need. This, of course, is not universal. This is, in particular, social and cultural settings. So this idea of economic rationality is in and of itself ethnocentric. That is, it relies upon particular cultural frames to define behaviors for all of humanity. But as we'll see, there are different contexts within which these rules don't apply. The 3 phases of economic activity are production, distribution, exchange, and consumption. From an anthropological viewpoint, we're going to consider production in the context of labor, modes and means and relations of production. In terms of distribution and exchange, we'll look at gift and commodity exchanges. We'll also consider Carl Polanyi's work on reciprocity, redistribution, and market exchanges. We will then look at consumption, internal and external explanations for this, and what is actually being consumed. And again, a primary example of that was from the title slide with that first Starbucks. So here you can see an image of child workers, which of course has been an issue within the United States. The children workers were utilized without much in terms of regulations. There was a lot of safety issues here. And many might point to this and say, well, this is a win in terms of child safety. And while that's true, it's also true that it was a win in terms of labor, because this, of course, meant that more adults could potentially be employed overall. And so labor is an incredibly key consideration, and it's one that Karl Marx looks at extensively. Labor is that activity linking human social groups to the material world around them. For Marx, labor is therefore always social. It is a central Marxian concept. Physical labor determines the production of food, clothing, shelter, tools, and mental labor is what permits people to organize their labor in different ways. The modes of production, these are concepts from Marx here, so we're going to discuss modes of production, means of production, and relations of production. The mode is a specific historically occurring set of social relations through which labor is deployed to wrest energy from nature by means of the tools, skills, organization, and knowledge. Those tools, skills, organization, and knowledge are what Marx referred to as the means of production. The relations of production are those social relations linking people who use a given means of production within a particular mode of production. So different types of labor were assigned to different classes with ranked groups within a hierarchically stratified society whose membership is defined primarily in terms of wealth, occupation, and other economic criteria. And we'll be talking more about this idea of class in the sections on social organization and social differentiation. For Marx, there were 8 different modes of production. Eric Wolff outlines 3 of these that are vital to human history: the kin-ordered, the tributary, and the capitalist mode. The kin-ordered is when social labor is ordered by kinship relations. So this is often found in foraging and farming and herding societies that are not organized by domination. The tributary mode involves a primary producer having access to the means of production in accordance with to a tribute paid to a political entity. This mode can exist when farmers are part of a social system divided by class, in other words, rulers and subjects. The capitalist mode has 3 main components, and the one that often trips up students is the second one here, that workers are required to sell their labor to the capitalist class in order to survive. And, if we look at that today, you might be looking at that and say, well, we're not required to do anything. We have this idea of free will. We can do what we want. At the time when Marx was writing, what he saw was a massive depopulation of the countryside and movement into urban areas. And of course, this has continued on since Marx's time, but he was witnessing a situation where people were no longer owning the means of production. And this goes to that first component of the capitalist mode of production. The means of production is privately owned and controlled by the capitalist class. So in essence, the workers only have their own labor to sell, so they must sell that in order to survive, for Karl Marx. The surpluses produced are used to make profit or reinvested into production in order to make bigger yields and higher profits. The relations of production is a key element in relating the social organization to productive activities. In other words, we can think about the contrast between kin-ordered relations where laborers are related to one another and the capitalist relations of production where cash payment is used. So some examples of production, some ethnographic examples of production and how this is thought about by anthropologists. We already mentioned Awia Ong's work on the production of possession, spirits, and multinational corporation in Malaysia in her later book, The Spirits of Resistance. Jane Collins' book here is featured on the top, Threads. An earlier work highlights some of this in a journal article, Deterritorialization in Workplace Culture, in which Collins documents the movement of a garment factory, their production from the United States to Mexico and eventually China, and the impacts that has for people across the supply chain, and particularly those who are working in the production process. Mark Moberg's Myths That Divide, Immigrant Labor and Class Segmentation, the Belizean banana industry, looks at how nationality separates out individuals working in Belize and is ultimately used to drive down wages. Dr. Sue Daria here at Bloomsburg University has done similar work of ethnic segmentation in upstate New York in factories as well. Kathleen Pickering's 2004 journal article, Decolonizing Time Regimes, looks at Lakota society and their conception of time oriented around task-oriented approaches to time versus the time-oriented approach that we often see in workaday labor and in things like going in and punching the time card versus tasks that you would just do, and that's how you would mark time. And it doesn't necessarily have to fall within specific so-called working hours. Distribution and exchange. Under neoclassical economic theory, this way of looking at distribution and exchange. There was a formal attempt to explain the workings of capitalist enterprise with particular attention to distribution. This is the foundation of early economists who, at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, began to study the changes to economic and social lives of Europeans. So in considering this, distribution and exchange, we can look at capitalism as an economic system dominated by the supply-demand price mechanism, which is referred to as the market. Capitalism also refers to the entire way of life that grew in response to and in service of that market. The most prominent difference between capitalism and feudalism is regarding distribution of goods. In capitalist economic relations, these depend on buyers and sellers, not corresponding statuses of lord and peasants. Anthropological approaches have been really cautious about applying the neoclassical model of economics, which stresses the centrality of market forces, the supply-demand price mechanism, as driving production and consumption to all human societies. Instead, alternative economic models were found to be practiced. And this is this idea of gift exchanges and commodity exchanges. Gift exchanges can be thought about as non-capitalist forms of economic exchanges that are deeply embedded in social relations and always require a return gift. And this has been written about in marketing, John Sherry's work. It's also been written about quite extensively in anthropology. Commodity exchanges are impersonal economic exchanges typical of the capitalist market in which goods are exchanged for cash and exchange partners need not have anything further to do with one another. Carl Polanyi, economist, looked at distribution and exchange and devised three modes of exchange or patterns according to which distribution takes place: reciprocity, redistribution, and market exchange. Reciprocity refers to the exchange of goods and services of equal value. There are three types of reciprocity. Generalized, when the exchange is done without the expectation of immediate or equal return. This would be parents to their children. So, for example, when I turned 18, my parents didn't give me a bill that said, "Hey, David, you have to pay us all this money that we spent, giving birth to you, feeding you, making sure you had the right clothes, did your sports and activities, all of this type of stuff," right? No one, I don't think, got a bill for being raised. Balanced in exchange that requires a return of equal value in a specific amount of time. And then negative when a party hopes to get something for nothing, so basically haggling over prices. Redistribution is a mode of exchange that requires some forms of centralized social organization to receive economic contributions from all members of the group and to redistribute them in such a way as to provide for every member of a group. So one of the famous anthropological examples of this is the potlatch of the Northwest Coast, Native Americans, First Peoples in Canada and into Alaska. And basically, all of the value would be, all of the materials, oolakan oil, fish oil, would be accumulated and then redistributed in a massive ceremony. Of course, we also see redistribution occurring with taxes. The IRS is a redistributive mechanism. We also see this with Pennsylvania State. And if you are in Columbia County and a taxpayer also, or in Pennsylvania, many of the localities also require a local tax. Market exchange, the exchange of goods, trade calculated in terms of multi-purpose medium of exchange and standard value, that's money, carried out by the supply-demand price mechanism or the market. Some ethnographic examples, probably the most famous of these that really highlights the work that comes later on is Marcel Mauss's The Gift. I was a student of Emil Durkheim, and in The Gift looks at commodity exchanges and looking at potlatching as well as the Trobriand Islands and some of Malinowski's work as well. but each gift would also necessitate a return gift of equal value.